Hi, welcome to Murf+E Unfiltered, Zero BS Biz Talk. I'm Kathleen Murphy, and I'm here today with my guest co-host, David Radlo. How are you, David?
Real good. How you doing, Kathy?
Good. What a treat it is to be here with you. I just want to, for context, give people a little bit of an awareness as to how I know you and how long we've actually known each other. We won't go into exact details on decades necessarily. People can do maybe some math, but we've known each other, I think, since you were about 13. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Pretty accurate,
yeah, there
right?
You go.
So
that's
people
right.
can figure it out from there, right? How long we've known each other. But it's been a really long time. And I thought what was really fun for this topic in particular was the fact that from a context perspective, it's ironic that we have known each other for so long, and today's topic is going to be about trust. And specifically, we're going to be talking about who do you trust? What are the aspects and elements related to how you go about figuring this out? Most people have some kind of potentially a system, if you will. Not everybody does. So when I think about it from the perspective of the question itself, it's a tough question, let's face it, right? And who do you trust? How do you trust others? And when is it the right time to trust them? Certainly when we first met when we were 13, we probably didn't instantly have a trust factor in place necessarily, but eventually at some point we got to where we are today. And I would say that you are somebody that I would implicitly trust based on the amount of years that we've known each other, which is really an amazing thing. It does take time, like I just suggested, for trust to evolve, certainly. And if you were to ask multiple people, how long does it take you to trust somebody? You're going to get a myriad of responses. It's not going to be the same response by any stretch of the imagination. And let's face it, we're also put into different scenarios that have us test out whether we trust somebody or not. But they're all going to be different, whether they're in the workplace or whether they're personal. But determining if, in fact, we need to trust somebody quickly. Sometimes there are situations, right, where you have to trust somebody quickly. What are your thoughts in terms of how you go about trusting somebody? You obviously.
No, I'm from New England, and I've been to town meeting. I don't trust anybody, you know what I mean? If someone new comes in and they got a presentation the first year, that's going to get rejected. I'm sorry.
Right away.
Come back, absolutely.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Maybe next year we can have some small talk or the year after, but that's the way it is. Sometimes maybe a decade before someone trusts someone around here.
That's right. That's right.
So what are you going to do in that situation? And then what are you going to do? You're going to force someone to actually trust someone sooner than they want to?
Right.
That's the question.
Exactly. Well, you've been in business for a long time. You were a very successful businessman. You ran a company. You sold a company. You've now pivoted and are doing incredibly interesting other things from the experience that you've gleaned from all the years that you were in the workforce, if you will. Give me an example maybe of somebody that you had to quickly in this particular situation grant them more than your year sort of trust level. How did that go about? How did that come about?
Well, yeah, normally, at work, we don't let anybody from the outside in to keep secrets and all that, okay? But all of a sudden, we had a gas leak and, a fire, and then next thing you know, hey, I was very excited to have the fire department show up.
Exactly. That's a perfect example, right? Implicit trust. And there are scenarios where that definitely is the case.
What's your process? Do you have a system?
I do have a system, and it's not necessarily a really lengthy system that I have, but it typically involves giving everybody the benefit of the doubt. So we have different sort of maybe opinions in terms of how we go about granting trust, but I will generally make the assumption that I can trust somebody until I can't. And when they don't when they put themselves in a position and I feel like I can't trust them, and then they come through and prove that I can't trust them, I'm generally going to give somebody the benefit of the doubt and maybe give them an opportunity to trust them. But I will typically make the assumption that prove me wrong is my simple system. I feel like it takes a lot of energy to distrust somebody, and that's, from my perspective, negative energy that I do not care to invest in. So I'd rather invest positive energy into you, having you show and demonstrate to me that you're worthy of the trust that I've given you to do whatever it is that I'm trusting you with, whether it's taking care of my children, taking care of a project on a team, investing my money for me, whatever that case may be. There's kind of a wide spectrum. As you know, I'm working and have been for the last 18 months on a sports project, sports-related research project. And I interviewed 51 coaches. The 51st coach was interviewed probably about 3 weeks ago, just before Thanksgiving. And one of the questions that I asked them related to this particular topic, which is all about trust. And I asked them the same question in terms of how do you go about, do you have a system, and how do you go about trusting people? And one of the coaches, I love their response, was, especially because they oftentimes have to quickly queue up and have new people on their team, and within a matter of weeks go out there and play and trust one another to do the right thing. I'm not going to give away the sport, because it doesn't really matter in this case. But the thing that stuck out in my mind that I thought was really fascinating that he said was that he'll tell some of the younger players, you just have to trust me. Have you ever had to use that expression yourself?
Yes, you need to do that, but really you have to demonstrate that you are trustworthy. And to be fair, he's saying you have to trust me. Why?
Yes.
Because we have a common enemy.
Right.
We have to go out and we have to defend,
right.
or we need to score.
Exactly.
And you have to trust me. And you also, I mean, as a coach and a player, back then, you know, my specialty, I used to love taking on double teams. That was my job.
That was your job.
But I'll tell
Football.
you, and then football, play
Yes.
double teams and strong side defensive tackle or middle guard.
Uh-huh.
But I will tell you this, I trusted defensive end to hit the tight end, okay?
Right.
And if he didn't, I'd get killed,
Right,
okay?
right.
And also you trust that the linebacker or the safety would come in and make the tackle.
Yes.
Because if you're taking on the double team, then, you know what I mean, you're not going to make the tackle, and
No.
you got to trust them.
Exactly. I think it's really important to also allow yourself to be vulnerable. And also, one of the other things that I've gleaned from the research that I did with these coaches is that there can't be any gray areas in terms of, if there are, when you're trying to establish trust with somebody, that will quickly, unfortunately, help to erode any trust that's built up if there's some gray areas. And your communication, this goes along with that, has to be incredibly crystal clear. So when people are clear with their communications, I think there are a lot more opportunities to help to develop that trust factor. And when communication is strong, purposeful, and meaningful, it adds value to building up that trust bank, if you will. And so when you think about the trust from an analogy perspective, it being a bank that you're putting trust into to build it up, have you been in a situation where you thought your bank account was really strong with that person and then something happens? And if so, what did you do when that situation occurred?
Well, I think part of it is that, and I write this in my latest book. It's that.
What's your latest book called? Let's give that a shout out.
It's Secret Stories of Leadership, Growth and Innovation, Sustainable Transformation to a New and Better World.
Wow.
And
can't wait to read it.
And you got to read it. But in the book, you go through the type of the fact that you're giving and you're a trustworthy person.
Right.
And just because you have a certain moral code and a moral behavior because it's the right thing you do,
that's right,
doesn't mean that someone else is going to share that behavior.
No.
And they may at times take advantage of that behavior. And it's a question of, from an intellectual standpoint, that you realize that there are people out there that if you, quote, make yourself vulnerable by behaving and being vulnerable and being positive and direct and sharing and giving, doesn't always come back.
No, it doesn't. No, there isn't always that quid pro quo, unfortunately, that we'd like to assume is going to be there. I have some tips for people that I'm going to share that if, in fact, they're looking for ways to potentially develop trust with others, and it's been maybe a challenge for them, or maybe they're looking for some new ways to be able to do that. And I'm going to share them with you and the audience. So the first one is, what is your immediate and gut reaction when you first meet somebody? I think that's really important. I was talking to somebody that I know quite well the other day, and she was telling me about how her surgeon actually questioned her, my friend, with her gut feeling that something was wrong and that the doctor wasn't necessarily willing to investigate what was wrong. Turns out it's a good thing my friend trusted her gut, because it was basically a life or death situation in terms of if she hadn't trusted her gut and said to the doctor, yes, I respect the fact that you're a doctor, but my gut is telling me something is wrong. You need to look harder at this situation. And they did come to find out my friend was right. So not every situation is that extreme, but obviously it's something to consider. So I have people think about, do they err in being more or less trustful? It's just something to consider. And pay attention, like I said, to your gut instinct. It's there for a reason, as we know. And sometimes we dismiss that as something that we just commonly should apply. If you're building trust with another person or a group of people, make sure that you have good intentions and that they're followed through, and that you do what you said you were going to do. This is something that you and I, if it were a religion, I think that we would have it as the same religion. We follow through. Not everybody does. But when you do follow through, it's another sort of deposit that you're making into somebody's trust bank. But at the same time, equally, it can be a removal of that trust when it's broken there. And another thing that I'd like people to consider is whether, in fact, and this could be a little hard for some people to consider, especially because some people struggle with self-awareness. They may not even know it, chances are, if they're struggling with self-awareness. But do they come across as a trustworthy person, right? Like, you and I have maybe met some people in our life, and instantly we think, we can't trust this person, and so your gut's telling you that. But they may not know that. So that's a little curious, but it does happen. And is there also something about someone's presence that they're unaware of also that makes them untrustworthy? And that could be problematic, particularly if they're not aware of that. And I would say another one is to be consistent with doing anything that takes discipline. And you're going to need to work on being more consistent, just like following through with whatever it is that you say you're going to do. My word is something that I value enormously, and I value your word also. You're a person of your word. I can't say that for everybody. I'd like to be able to, but what are some maybe other tips that you might have in terms of if somebody were to be looking for ways to improve how to go about trusting others?
You can look someone straight in the eye, say what you mean what you say, shake hands, right. Be firm,
yes.
And be straight, and you can follow up. Mm-hmm. I'm sorry, I'm going to give a little 60-second education.
Please
here.
do.
Okay. I was 11 years old. It was 85 degrees, and my friends were playing out. And I agreed. I had an oral agreement with my father. I was going to, cut the grass.
Right.
Right. And I'm saying my son has had similar agreements. And then I got halfway through, and I just quit, took off. I told my dad, I said, Dad, I'm going to go. I'm going to go and swim. And he looked at me, and he said, hey, I defaulted on an oral agreement with him. Okay. And then I had a choice to either cut the lawn or not cut the lawn. I chose to cut the lawn, and I had to finish the job and come see him. Finished the job, came see him. Came with a quality assurance inspection. Went around the bushes, went around the trees, and he said, come back a second time. So I came back a second time, had a second quality assurance inspection. And at the end of 3 hours of that, for a 1 hour job, I got paid the $6 I was agreed to pay.
That was a tough $6 to earn.
It was tough, yeah, but you
But what a lesson.
never have that. But what a great lesson, you know?
Incredible lesson. Right, exactly. How many people actually have had that experience, especially at such a young age? And how fortunate were you? Probably that wasn't something that you thought you were fortunate to be experiencing at that point in time. Perhaps you would rather have maybe been with your friends. It was 85 degrees and gone swimming. But I love the fact that you're telling me that story now. I've never heard that story. I love it. And so many people can take from that and share that in their own way and through their own version and apply it, even more importantly, right? Apply it, because it's one thing to hear something, but take action on it. I'm always big about action. Speaking of action, I've got some more tips for people.
Okay.
And this one is be honest. That may sound ridiculously oversimplistic, but it's really not. And it's not always the forte of everybody. And we unfortunately know potentially some people that you know that maybe not all the time are they honest, but be honest. And do you consider yourself a trustworthy person? If you don't, perhaps others feel the same way about you. Now factor in whether there is something you're willing to work on being more trustworthy about. That's a challenge I'm going to put out there for people. So in order to trust others, are you going to need to be trustworthy yourself? Yes, definitively yes. And you can, yes, you can be disingenuous and mask being trustworthy, but I guarantee that others will see through this thin veneer at some point. And so it's something to work on and to take pride in. Is there a perfect amount of time to invest in a person that you're trying to establish trust with? The word is no. Basically, real simple. And building up that trust bank that we talked about earlier that I mentioned is going to take people various amounts of time, and there isn't a set or perfect amount of time to be able to do that. In terms of that example that you just gave, have you applied that to your own family, other people in your life?
Yeah, I mean, some people see it as an opportunity to take advantage of someone. I believe that, you know, if you have a moral life and a moral code, that this is the way to operate. Some people will see that as a point of weakness. I see it as the greatest strength of all.
I agree.
And you can mean what you say what you mean, and you know that you don't need a 25-page agreement to agree with an oral commitment and then follow through on that commitment.
That's right.
As disappointing that will be for the legal profession.
That's right, exactly. They're not going to like to hear that. Unfortunately, because we live in such a litigious world these days, the lawyers probably won't like that. Sorry, lawyers, but there is value still in someone's word. I completely agree with that.
Yeah, no, word is words, and then you can back it up with a written document or a written memorandum or
right.
You know, and all that kind of stuff.
Sure.
But on a day-to-day basis, you know, you give your word.
Yes.
Follow through with it.
Follow through with it, exactly. So one of the other things that I was thinking about was, how do you deal with maintaining trust in others? And I'll give a few points as it relates to my own version of that. And one of the things that I do is I invest time in people that I feel are worthy of investing time in and spend time with them. There's no sort of taking a shortcut on that. You have to invest that time in them. And I like to help people out. You do too. You're a great sponsor of giving of your time and energy and your expertise to others, and that is enormously, incredibly valuable. It's something that also helps to build trust. And then be genuine with that time. Be generous, and you are. I feel like I am also. I'm not the kind of person that keeps track of, oh, I spent this many minutes with, or this many hours with somebody. I just give it, and I suspect you're going to say yes to this. I always feel that whatever I put out there comes back, 2, 3, 4x. I'm not looking for it to work out that way. Maybe it doesn't work out that way all the time, but do you find that that's the case also?
Yeah, I mean, Adam Grant from Wharton said you're giver, takers, and matchers, right? And if you
Like
follow that premise, you know, I just give. I believe I'm a giver because it's the absolute right thing to do.
Right.
And yeah, will it come back to you? Yeah, it may, and a lot of times it may not, but it doesn't matter.
It doesn't.
The fact that you're living that way is what matters.
Exactly. And then how do you advise others that may be complacent about giving trust to others? Have you seen people that give trust when they probably shouldn't? Have you said anything to them in terms of, hey, pulling them aside, I'm not so sure that was really the right decision? Have you been in a situation like that?
Yeah, I mean, there was someone on the plane the other day that
Okay.
just happened to just sit next to me and just, because we had a flight delay, tell me everything about their business and everything they're doing and all their patents and all their inventions. And I'm saying, gee, thank you very much. You know, so but
What a gift.
you don't know who. Fortunately, I believe I'm an honorable person. I'll never take advantage of that situation. But I have no idea who's sitting behind me.
No, right, exactly, or what they're hearing or what they might do with that information, right? So in terms of, I talked about, do you have a favorite way to maybe go about granting somebody trust? Mine is through my gut instinct. Do you have a favorite sort of method that you apply?
I would just take it more than that. Go play golf with them if you can.
Go play
Not
golf.
during this time of year, but you will find out more in 18 holes of golf about everything about them, about their personal situation, what they believe, and if they cheat or don't cheat, and at what level. Play golf with them. Or
I played golf with you a really long time ago, and I haven't golfed that many times in my life, probably a dozen perhaps, and so I played golf with you one time during that sort of amount of dozen golf games, and I learned, you're right, I learned even more about you. You, because you're a lefty, is that correct?
Correct.
I remember, allowed me to try out your clubs because I'm ambidextrous, but I had only played with righty clubs. Come to find out, I'm potentially a better lefty golfer, was what I found out, discovered by playing golf with you that day.
You made yourself vulnerable.
I did. Oh, I sure did. That's for sure. That's for sure. But I think that's what it's all about. At the end of the day, if we can't be vulnerable, then what are we being? Are we being genuine? I think that again, it harkens back to taking a lot of energy. If you're spending it on being, thinking negatively towards somebody, or consequently, let's turn this around and face it, mirror at us, when we're investing or not being positive in terms of our outlook with people, in terms of how we present ourselves. I don't think that does anybody any favors either. So kind of any last minute considerations on this topic. It's such a great topic. It's just so applicable across the board, especially given the day and age that we're in, where we really need to try to increase trust. Any last thoughts?
Don't do business with jerks.
I like it.
Okay.
Don't do business.
And
with
all
jerks.
trust is limited.
All trust is limited. Excellent. Very, very true. Yeah. So there's potentially an expiration date on every trust contract.
It's all limited. It's like you can trust someone at what level. If you're on the same team,
Sure.
You're going to trust them to make a tackle, or for that matter, or knock the ball in the net.
Right. Exactly.
But you may not have them as your personal partner.
Right. Exactly. You may trust them on the field, but not off the field.
Correct.
Possibly. Right.
Yeah, and so you just have to have that gauge and be willing to, be vulnerable and analyze, and at the end of the day, you're gonna end up just fine.
Exactly. And ideally, you would want to trust somebody on and off the field. I'll leave it with that. So this time together went really quickly, David. Thank you so much for being my co-host and guest today. It was wonderful. I'd love to have you come back, and I want to thank everybody for being here. And please come back and see us again on Murf+E Unfiltered, Zero BS Biz Talk. Take care, everybody.